is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I have coming in from Birmingham in the United Kingdom, Al of freecapitalism.net. I've been on his program before, and you can check that under our program title was Bitcoins and Anarchy, and we'll be talking about Bitcoins and Anarchy and capitalism. And but the first question now, before we get started, is how did you become an anarchist?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Jeff. How did I become an anarchist? So I was in Washington, D.C. at the time, and I was discussing over some chicken wings with an economist from the Cato Institute about the morality of exchanges. And he said to me, if you were on a desert island and there was another person on that desert island with some resources that you needed, would it be okay for you to take those? And at the time, the work that I was doing, I said, yeah, sure. Whoever has the biggest stick, presumably, can go have the resources. And then he kind of pointed out to me how sort of immoral that is. And that's what actually you're taught in major universities when it comes to economics. The idea that the person or the institution that has the most force is the one that is most legitimate to distribute resources and make the best decisions. And when I came to realize this, that all this theory was based on this fundamental premise, that there was a fallacy lying in there, the idea that force is sufficient legitimacy. So at that point, I started reading a couple of libertarian things. And then my only argument was against defense. And I said, well, how could people possibly protect themselves without a state? And then someone gave me a Murray Rothbard book, and everything changed. So I guess it was, I'd like to say it was a 100% rational decision, but I don't believe that anyone's movement to anarchism is 100% rational. I think it's, to be quite honest, I think it's all part of growing up, I'd say.
That's an interesting perspective, because I also think that all people are born anarchist, and they learn through life and what they learn in usually public government schools and things like college and all that sort of stuff, more how to live in a sort of a status way, a very collectivized and a system based on theft and violence. And so I think people are born anarchists, and they kind of get that kind of beaten out of them, and then some people do eventually come back.
Yeah, and I think something really important is, I think there's a famous phrase by Mark Twain who said, don't let schooling get in the way of your education. And I think that's a very true point, because the idea that an education system that is not paid for by the consumer has the interests of the consumer at heart is a false idea. And the history of schooling itself really kind of indicates that it all began sort of as a Prussian model of developing this relationship between the state and the child. And it seems very strange to me that people are very much willing to accept a child's curriculum from sort of on high. Like, what do we really know? For example, in the curriculum in the UK for schooling, what do we really know about where it comes from? It's written by sort of a board of teachers that they have their own wishes, they have their own incentives, and those incentives aren't reflected in the money that the consumer has to pay. Look at the Common Core in the States. What do we really know about the people who've actually written that sort of stuff? And I think parents should be a little bit more skeptical about this sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely, and it's actually been a big plan. John Taylor Gatto's written a lot about it, how it was all put into place to basically control society and make people into worker bees, and to make them compliant and obedient and respect authority. And so it's all been set up that way. And of course, over the decades now, we've had all kinds of government contraptions that have ruined a lot of family life. So it used to be especially back in the U.S. in the 50s and 60s, there was just the father would be usually the guy who's working and making the money, and the woman would be at home, usually, not always, but usually with the children and helping them learn about life and things like that. But now, because of inflation and taxes and regulation, now it's very hard for most people to live on a one income, and so this was sort of a plan. You can go back through the Rockefellers and all kinds of people like that, the Rothschilds. They've always had this plan to basically destroy the families and make it so that the government is the one that's actually educating the children. And now it's come to the point after decades and decades of this that people think it's just normal. And many people, many very decent people will, they don't really think about these concepts the same way that we do. They just think it's just normal that, well, of course, the government's going to educate my children, edumacate, I call it, my children, because, that's just the way it is. And for 12 years, they have to go there and be obedient and get all these crazy ideas pumped into their heads, and a lot of very wrong ideas, including, of course, things like history, which is all written by the governments, that whatever school they're in, which always says their government's the best government and all that kind of stuff. And it's just terrible. They've been really tearing apart families now for decades. And of course, in the U.S., it's even worse with the drug war now and all kinds of criminality. Everything's illegal. I rarely meet anyone from the U.S. who hasn't been arrested anymore. And if I have a lot of friends from the Free State Project in New Hampshire. These are a lot of libertarians and anarchists who've moved to this one area, and I see every day someone's getting pulled over, arrested. Amanda Billyrock, a past Anarchast guest, she got pulled over a month or so ago, and she just refused to speak to the police, which theoretically is your right to remain silent, but not anymore. That's actually, they've taken that out now too. So she got charged with like 10 different things, and all she was doing was just driving back to her house, and she didn't do anything wrong. They thought maybe she had been drinking, but she hadn't even been drinking, and she had got numerous charges filed against her, and they did the same thing they always do, which is they had so many charges against her that they let her plea to a deal. They said, we'll let you just plead to disobeying authority, which actually I think is a patch of honor on your chest if you're charged with disobeying authority. But that's what they do. They just run people through the system and get them all criminalized, and that destroys families too. Because if you're just a father and maybe you smoke a marijuana, which is legal now in a few states, but if you get caught, you could be in jail for years. That tears apart families. They're just constantly doing this. Taxes, of course, really make it so hard for people to live. And then, of course, because of that, people just end up putting their people in these schools because they're free, although they're paying for them. It's just terrible.
Yeah, and I'd just like to touch on something that we, if you go to our channel, we talk about this quite a lot, actually. And it's sort of the implied things behind the powers that we give to the police, for example. So one of the common claims by, say, just libertarians in general, or in fact anyone, but particularly libertarians, is that they're very specific about the worries that they have concerning certain laws. So say there is a law to stop people to find heroin, for example. What they don't realize is that what the law says has nothing to do with what the law results in. What it really means is that you're giving the police the power to stop and search you at any point, and it's regardless of what the consequences are. It doesn't matter if it's the worst thing that could possibly happen. What matters is that you're giving an unaccountable institution the ability to do things which they would otherwise not be able to do. So I think it's really, really important for people to, when it comes to laws and such, is not to pick and choose what it is they like and what it is they don't like, because otherwise you're simply giving them the power, the police the power to control so many different aspects of your life, even if it's the smallest law, any power at all. And that really relates to the family. It really does. The situation that if you allow, for example, welfare and the family are two very opposing notions. If you allow any welfare of any kind, no money is now safe. So if you allow a welfare state to exist, it means that there is no amount of money which doesn't have to be checked, if you even have the smallest tax, which is 1 single cent a year, it means that all money has to be checked so that you're aware, the government is aware of how much money you need to pay. So libertarians, I think, really, really need to understand this, that it is not the level at which the government is tyrannical, it's the fact that they have the capability to be tyrannical makes their tyranny inevitable.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the big things I get asked a lot on Bitcoin, and I know you're big into Bitcoin. We'll talk a little bit about that, but I've been on the media in the U.S., and the big thing they always bring up, they bring up two things. They say, well, this makes it so that people can buy drugs or launder money a lot easier. And what I would like to say, they never allow me to talk very much on those programs, is neither of those things should be illegal. First of all, there should be no taxes, and you just pointed that out. So when you do have a tax, now all of a sudden they have to check all the money to make sure everyone's paying all their taxes. So they're literally watching every transaction you make just to make sure that you're paying these taxes, which is just brutal and terrible, and most of that money just goes to bureaucracy and to the financial elites anyway. And then they say the drug war. That's another just a heinous. That's been one of the worst things that's ever happened in the last century. Is the war on drugs. And actually, that comedian guy, actor guy, just came out with a pretty strong statement. He's sort of been getting a lot of media lately. Russell Brand, and he was in Austria at some European Union committee. I don't know how or why he was on there, but he made a very impassioned plea that we have to stop this drug war, and I totally agree. Of course, this drug war has literally killed millions of people. I live here in Mexico. I see the ruins of the drug war all the time in the Mexican news here. There's just constantly people dying because they're just trying to get product to willing customers, voluntary customers, and because it's illegal, you have to have all these guys with guns out there checking everyone's houses and killing people, and then they all kill each other because they're fighting over territory because they can't actually have any decent legal ramifications for if someone defrauds them. Basically, it all comes down to just you kill each other because there's no other way to actually deal with problems in a world that's been driven underground. And yeah, it's just terrible, all these things. And one thing I do want to ask you, and I've had a few people on from the UK on Anarchast, the police state and the government in the UK is quite a bit different than in the US. It's worse in some areas, the surveillance state, although NSA is now making that even worse in the US. But London used to be, or still is, probably the most surveilled place on earth with cameras all over the place. What's your thoughts on the lifestyle in England, and as well the hopes that there's some sort of anarchist ideas over there? I know you were telling me before we came on that you were quite cautious about what you want to say with your name, because it's actually looked down upon in England if you're a free market advocate.
Absolutely, yeah. So I've lived in both the States and the UK, and I think what's interesting is a lot of people I've spoken to from the UK have gone to the US. There was this element of it felt almost like you were coming home when you came to the US, because there was so much more freedom there. And for everyone in the US who thinks they have tyranny, they ain't seen nothing yet. I'd have to say, because in the UK, the extent to which we are regulated, and to the extent to which we are individually planned by central planning is enormous. And I think it's based completely on the historical origins that the UK has occurred out of. For example, in the UK, it's very much the case that people in society are divided up by the class system. So, there's people have claimed that in the early 20th century in the United States, people were divided up more by race than class. That was the claim by some historians, and they compared it to the UK, that's always been divided up by class, and that race didn't have as a big an issue in the UK as class did. And that is particularly true. During the British Empire, it was the case that we'd have schools that were privately paid for by the upper middle classes and the nobility. And those upper middle classes were expected to be trained almost in a militaristic fashion to govern the UK, to govern the islands, and pre-prepare them from birth to actually govern these islands. And there was a famous poet who once said, "The class of a Britishman is born on his tongue." That is the way that you speak is very much where you end up in society. I know a lot of Americans out there and such who see some of the Ritchie films like Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels don't understand a word these guys are saying, and that and you sort of compare that to perhaps Hugh Grant or someone like that. You can hear there's very much a difference, and it's extraordinary because all over the country, if you're in sort of upper middle class, you speak more like Hugh Grant than you're going to speak like someone from Lock, Stock. So we've almost got a caste system like they had in India, or in some instances still do, that we're sort of predetermined to fill certain roles. And I think that's the ultimate oppression, the ultimate anti-freedom, that we're actually born into these predefined roles just as a result of our class. And the extraordinary thing is that in 1997 in the UK, the left-wing government came to power. And what they basically stated was that we intend to tear down all these old ideas of the middle class runs the country and the lower class works in the factories and does manufacturing and stuff. So what they did essentially was destroy manufacturing. They tried to level out the schools. And what actually occurred is that all the government control that was supposedly to reduce the existence of this caste system actually caused the caste system to be a hell of a lot smaller and a hell of a lot more government. So it became the situation where the royalty, the upper middle class, the rich people, were no longer rich because they owned factories, because they owned businesses. They were now rich because the closer you are to the government was the richer you became. And we're now seeing sort of the end of that. You can see riots in London. You can see how dependent our society is on government handouts, how taxation, it's considered rude not to pay your taxes. It's considered evil not to pay your taxes because you're not facilitating the dependency of people. And yet, the worst part is you're actually taught to sort of hate yourself, because the people who are living on government welfare or living on social security are actually, the government tries to get people to shun them, like to try and push them out of society, because it's based on the historical idea that people were forced into workhouses in the Victorian times, where you had Oliver Twist asking for more soup or whatever, more like gunge or whatever for him to eat, and this is the way that they've been trying to push it onto the lower classes in Britain. And so having a predefined role, having this point where you have to do what you're told, means that all individualism is rude, because you're not fulfilling your role in society. You're being selfish enough not doing what you're told. And that's why I think libertarianism in the UK is tiny, and anarchism in the UK is, I probably know both of them.
Wow, that's sad.
Yeah.
So what do you think is going to happen? There's been some riots and stuff. Do you see some sort of major uprising on the horizon?
Absolutely not. I think the UK, one of the things, there's some very famous historians and poets and such who've always said that the interesting thing about, and this even relates back to German anthropologists who came to the UK back in the 19th century, they said the most extraordinary thing about the British man is that he never seems to bother or be worried about things being taken from him. Like this idea of property is a privilege. It's not a right. And so when things are destroyed and when things are taken away, look at World War II, when the UK was bombed and London was almost completely it was absolutely destroyed. It was flattened by the bombing campaign. It was well known that Britain soldiered on, that Britain carried on going for whatever reason. And it's almost as if that we've been in a state of the Second World War ever since then. London continues to be flattened. People continually are destroyed and hurt emotionally, and you can kind of sense that. When I remember, I went to St. Petersburg once in Russia, and you had this feeling like everything was so grey and everything was so uniformal, and people weren't allowed to express themselves, and it was very much mechanistic. It was like a giant machine of people who would glumly go from one place to another and do one place to another. And the UK has really, really become so much more like that. It's become this instance where you're sort of a sheep told what to do next, and you're just simply going through the conveyor belt, and that your life script has already been written for you. And that's why the statistics reflect that, because people between the ages of 21 and 30 in the UK at this point are actually leaving more than are coming in. There's more people leaving at those ages. The young people are leaving this country, as simple as that. And the government's solution is to get very, very poor countries from the European Union to join the EU so that they can come over here, and this is an actual statement by the government, and can pay our pensions. It's almost like the empire continues to exist. The empire just only exists within our own borders of this small island, where we use people from abroad to live these pompous lives.
Wow, amazing. I just saw a recent stat that I found quite interesting. They did a poll in the UK and they asked people their thoughts on different areas, and they just asked a bunch of different countries and unions like the EU. And the EU was like way down the list. It was almost at the bottom. And I found that interesting. There seems to be quite a bit of negativity towards the EU in the UK. Could you confirm or deny that, and maybe expand on that?
So, something that's happened in the UK since 1997 has completely transformed the country. See, I see this as I have a mixed opinion on this. So, there has been more immigration into the United Kingdom from 1997 up to, I believe it was 2006, than there has been immigration from 1066, the Battle of Hastings in the 11th century, up to 1997. So you had, I believe it's some 4 times the amount of immigration in the last 15 years than you'd had in the previous 900 years. And what it did was the speed at which this immigration came actually caused certain transformations in society. What tends to happen, I mean, I would do this personally. When I went to the United States, I went to live in places where there are other expats, and I'm sure, like, you have Gulch in Chile, right? Expats like to live together. It's a great thing. And that's exactly what happened in the UK. So you had people from the EU, you had people from abroad coming to all live in the same place. But the thing was, people complained that there wasn't sufficient integration, and that there was areas that were somewhat cordoned off from the I guess you could call it an indigenous population, whatever the hell that means. And that has created a lot of anger by British people, because government schools have always told the British people that they're superior. There is actually a long history, a long legacy in the UK of racial superiority. This was certainly, if you look at any of the propaganda from World War I, look at any of the propaganda from World War II, the government was trying to get this idea that the British people were racially superior to the Hun, to the German, to the whatever. And I mean, this was less than 100 years ago. This is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, it's like it reminds me of like South Africa in the 50s. I mean, it's such a terrifying instance, and this is reflected in what people's opinion is. So people say that it's the EU's fault for immigration. It's the EU's fault for the transformation of our country. And when we had the census, the British census that came, where the government has to check that all its livestock, how many livestock it has, etc., and where they live, they found that there is more people in London now that were born abroad than were born in the UK. And that transformation that's happened in less than 15 years has just completely changed people's minds. Now, I don't believe that government should be able to control where people go. I don't think that at all. But then again, I would also say that I think that if people really cared enough to have a society where they actually regulated people coming in and out, and if they cared enough for that, then they should pay for it. they should pay for it, and they could create their own society. If that was the rules that they wanted, so be it. I don't want to live there. I want to live in somewhere that's highly fluid, that has people come and going all the time. That's really exciting and an interesting place. But that's why people hate the EU, and that's why we've seen a rise in a particular party called UKIP, which is the UK Independence Party. And the interesting thing is in May this year, there's going to be a European election where they re-elect the European Parliament. And basically all the polls are demonstrating that the party that's going to win this election is going to be UKIP. And this just demonstrates how little the British government cares about what anybody thinks. The fact that the largest party in the European Parliament representing Britain will be one that says, it's in the name, we need to go, we need to leave. It's like having a parliament full of anarchists. It's an opposite message to what people clearly want. But the government just doesn't care, because the amount of corruption, they've actually managed to sort of estimate and calculate how much corruption occurs in the EU, and the amount of corruption in the EU in terms of money is actually equal to the entire economies of sub-Saharan Africa put together. So it's a significant amount, and that's why people don't like the EU.
Interesting, especially about what you said about how they taught you in school that England's the best. I went to government school in Canada, and both the schools and the media always trying to basically say Canada's the best, we're the best. Of course, in the U.S., everyone thinks we're the best. It's ridiculous. And then you also brought up that many people have actually believed this and actually believe that there's something special about being British, when actually the royal family, I think, and you said they were very against the Germans and all that. I think the royal family all stemmed from Germany.
That's right, yeah. They had to change their second name in the Second World War. Windsor isn't their real name. Windsor is actually just where they lived. And they changed it to that name because it made them sound German. And they didn't want to look so bad, which was interesting because in the First World War, where hundreds of thousands of people died, the king's cousin was in fact the Kaiser. So it was cousins fighting. And it was like a family feud at the cost of the general population. And nobody seemed to care, which seems very odd indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, very odd. So yeah, let's talk about capitalism, because you run freecapitalism.net, and you've got some podcasts on there, and I've listened to a few of them. They're really good, and we'll have the links to that below, and we'll let you promote that at the end. But why don't you tell us about your views on capitalism and why you're doing freecapitalism.net?
Okay, so the reason I'm doing freecapitalism.net is, one, there isn't enough fun in libertarianism at the moment. There isn't enough witty banter, I guess you could call it. There isn't enough funny jokes. There's too many lectures. There's too many people talking philosophy that perhaps doesn't have enough jokes in it, or perhaps are a little bit more dad jokes. And yet, the funny part is if you look at, there was a statistics done on anarcho-capitalism subreddit on the sort of what kind of people actually are interested in like anarcho-capitalism. And basically, the vast majority of them, by 60 or 70%, are either students, unemployed, but they're certainly under the age of 25. And I think that what I wanted to do was make a sort of media hub that talks about anarchism, talks about libertarianism and freedom and such, but also sort of engages with that younger kind of audience at like university level and that sort of thing. Because I think we could all do with a bit more fun, a little bit less getting upset about how rubbish the government is, I guess.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it's actually quite hopeful that many of the people who are anarchists or anarcho-capitalists are the younger people. It's really sort of it actually makes sense, because if you're under 30, you've grown up in nothing but the worst side of government, all the bad things. So all the baby boomers, they got all the good things because they basically stole from their children, but they don't really see it that way because they don't know how it all works. But that's essentially what they did. They actually stole from their own children. And so the kids nowadays, they get born in the U.S., they already have $250,000 worth of federal government debt and liabilities overhanging them right from day one. Good luck paying that back. And then, of course, as these governments are starting to really collapse now, all these the socialism all throughout the Western world is really rearing its ugly head now. of course, the police state starts to ramp up to keep people into control, and so you get all these kids who are just getting pulled over every day and beaten up by cops and forced into these government schools, and they actually have access to the internet now, so they kind of realize that a lot of the stuff they're being forced to learn is not really necessarily correct at all, and they'd rather just learn their own things. And so a lot of the younger people, and I think this is a real paradigm shift, and this is going to be very interesting over the next few years or decades, is how a lot of the younger people are waking up to what's going on, and they're not going to they're not going to stick with this system very much longer, and it's going to be interesting because, of course, the older people are going to continue to die off, and a lot of these younger people who don't believe in this, and of course the system's going to collapse on its own because it's all so indebted through all the socialism and all the things that have been done over decades and decades. It's really interesting and hopeful to see that, and I actually agree with you as well that we do need more fun, interesting anarchist type shows, and I think there's a lot of room out there for anyone watching. Start your own, just make it fun and make it sort of like Howard Stern of anarchism, and that's a little bit of what you do at freecapitalism.net, and definitely check out Al's stuff over there. And before we get closing off here, I do want to ask you about Bitcoin, because I know you're big into Bitcoin. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why or how you got into Bitcoin and what you're up to and what you've been discovering?
Okay, so what got me into Bitcoin was the fact that I think it was Molyneux, actually. I think it was Stefan Molyneux. I saw his video, and I said, what's all this about? And I had a look at it, and the first thing I bought, actually, was Dogecoin. And I sent it from my phone, from my laptop to my phone, and my mind was just completely and utterly blown. And then when someone told me that the government didn't like it, I said, I need to get as much of this as I possibly can. And that really got me into it, and it was a technological innovation. But also this metaphor that seems to be going around quite a lot at the moment is that Bitcoin is the internet of the late 1990s. And
yeah,
that
I think I started that.
Yeah, I'm hoping that means that it's like it. It's not the same in it, as in there's no tech bubble. I'm kind of hoping that part doesn't happen, but all the rest of it, like all the stuff happening now, does happen.
Well, I would digress there a little bit. The tech bubble did kind of suck. It also made a lot of people a lot of money too, but that didn't necessarily destroy the internet at all. It was just a side thing that happened in the markets because they were inflating the currency so much, and all the money just went into tech. And I actually think we probably will see some sort of a Bitcoin bubble. We're seeing all kinds of Bitcoin companies starting up right now. We're seeing private venture capital funds flowing into it. I think it was Andreessen, the guy who's sort of known as being one of the pioneers of the internet, has said he's got a venture capital fund worth billions, and he said he's going to be putting hundreds of millions of dollars into Bitcoin-related funds and companies over the next few years. So we're seeing a very decent size of money coming into the Bitcoin market. So we probably will see some sort of Bitcoin bubble, but it'll be a Bitcoin bubble in the stocks of the companies that are doing Bitcoin companies, and that should be a hint to people to start one up right now and then try to get on that wave. But that won't necessarily destroy Bitcoin the same way that the tech bubble did not at all destroy the internet.
Absolutely. And I think there's a sort of a philosophy, there's sort of a point underneath Bitcoin that's implied in Bitcoin. So when someone asks me what's the difference between the US and the UK in terms of people's fundamental motivations and life script, the sort of script that they write in their head to what they should do next in their life. And the difference is that, for example, when you walk along the street, say imagine you're a child and you walk along the street with your father, and you see a guy in a really expensive nice car, and you say to your father, like, Daddy, why does he have such a nice car? And in England, the dad will turn around and reply and say, yeah, I know, he's a rich bastard, right? Like this idea that he's a con man, he's a bad guy because he has this nice car. But in the United States, I think the difference is, but soon I would say it's going to be is that the father would turn around and say, yeah, and you can have that car one day, son. If you work hard enough, then you can have that one day. But in Europe, it's not that. It's the rich bastard. But he's a bad guy for being rich. And I think Bitcoin is a tool for everyone to say, you can have that car one day. You can have that nice car one day. It's like this opening in a system which previously richness was the manipulation, or your contacts, your class, your manipulation of the government. And Bitcoin isn't that. Bitcoin is this opportunity. It's not even in a philosophical sense, it's an opportunity. It's not even that big of a deal in terms of what it actually is. If you look at the cryptography, it's completely incremental. It's like the tiniest little shift. If you look at the papers that Satoshi cites, for example, in his paper, they're from years ago, and he's basically, I've just put all these things from years ago in one thing. It's like a slight incremental thing. The only really, I would say, original part of Satoshi's paper was the way he was going to protect against attack, like this idea that the power that you received over the Bitcoin protocol would be as a result of the computational power you offered, as opposed to like individual identities and things like that, where other systems were involved. So it's only incremental advance. And I think that's the thing about Bitcoin, is that it's an idea more than anything else, or at least it's something that facilitates an idea about that. But something I really wanted to mention was what I think a lot of people are wrong about. So on YouTube at the moment, and we're posting a video of basically sort of more in-depth version of what I'm about to say in a couple of days. But something that's going on YouTube, something that's going on the sort of general narrative and on the news. So you've got basically the general narrative on the news is that Bitcoin crashed a few weeks ago, and everyone's lost their money, and now Bitcoin's going away for the fourth, fifth time, or whatever it is. And then you have the alternative media that says Bitcoin isn't going away. How funny is it that these dinosaur news people still believe this crap that they think is all? And I don't think they really believe it, because I'm aware that most of these news corporations, they have banks advertising in their magazines on their websites. If you piss off banks, you lose your advertising. So I actually think a lot of these guys are actually less stupid than we presume them to be. But I think there's another narrative there which needs to be pointed out. A study by McKinsey found that 2.6 billion people in this world are not financially included in formal banking systems, formal financial systems. 2.6 billion people, that's a very considerable proportion of the human population. And yet the world average of internet connectivity is about 38%. And this was in 2012, which I can assure you it's gone up considerably since then. And now we've got projects from Google and projects from other large companies. I'm slightly worried that Google is one of them, to be quite honest, for NSA purposes. But there are a lot of internet connection initiatives going on right now. If we can increase the number of people who can be connected to the internet to what, like 60, 65%, 70%, something like that, which I think is purely conceivable in the next sort of 15, 20 years, we're going to include an enormous number of people into financial services. And just to point out how powerful this is, in Kenya right now, over 60% of all Kenyan GDP exists in mobile money. It exists in a private currency distributed by a company called Safaricom. And essentially what it is it's like mobile credit. It's like pay-as-you-go, or like prepaid phone. It's like credit that you can give in for money. And it was adopted, so it started in 2006, and by 2010, you had 60% of GDP, basically based on this. I mean, the speed at which that happens is incredible, but also the social effect of it. So let me give you one example. So, it's actually caused like an uplifting of women out of poverty in Kenya. So women could now have a bank account on their mobile phone without their husbands knowing. This has given them like more freedom, and also the number of muggings went down. The number of people being thieved from in the street went down hugely by about 40 to 50%. And this is in Kenya, in a place that has been war torn. It was originally, still trying to recover from British imperialism. it only became an independent nation not less than 100 years ago. And now these guys, because they don't have, I would even call dinosaur infrastructure of phone landlines. I don't even use a phone landline anymore. I don't think I even have one in this house. I don't know. I don't think I know anyone on the street who has a phone landline. And yet all this stuff has already been set up. But Africa is this opportunity where there's nothing. Like, we can build it up from the beginning. And I think even Doug Casey said this about Africa being like this new land of opportunity, and certainly will be in sort of the near future. And Bitcoin is fundamentally a solution to that. And that's why I think even the Bitcoin will be worth $10 million is a ridiculous understatement. I think when you bring on half the population of the world into this, Bitcoin's going to be worth $1 billion of Bitcoin. Like extraordinary amounts of money, because the more people use it, the more it is. But the social change will be incredible. And what I really want to say is the look on all those people who support the foreign aid, all those people who support taxation to solve the problems of poverty in Africa, all those people who support Live Aid and Bob Geldof and all these sort of things, and the guys that always failed with these centrally planned things, the look on their face when Bitcoin completely revolutionizes the society, gives women the rights that they wanted, it reduces crime, and it's all through the free market, and the look on their face when that happens will be sweet, sweet victory.
Yeah, it's very exciting for sure, and I don't think people even still realize how exciting this could all get, and will get probably. Even if you look at what a lot of people, if you look at the average person, even in the U.S. today, your very average person, they don't even know what Bitcoin is, or maybe they've heard of it, and if anything, they're very skeptical of it. So this is. That's why I sort of compared Bitcoin to the internet around 1993, because I was around during those times. I was starting up an internet startup in 1994, and I remember how many people had questions about the internet. They're also very skeptical about it. Oh, that'll never catch on. No company would ever use the internet or give their employees laptops with access to the internet, because they could lose all their company's information and all that kind of stuff. And I used to actually sell internet advertising on stockhouse.com, which I started in 1994. And around 1994, 1995, we'd cold call companies and say, hey, do you want to advertise on our site? And they'd say, what's a site? And I'd say, well, it's on the internet. And they'd say, what's the internet? And then I try to explain it to them, and they'd be like, oh, I don't know, that doesn't make any sense at all. So it's very similar times, and of course, so many people made a lot of wealth from the internet, and still to this day are making a lot of wealth through the internet. And so I think for people to get more into Bitcoin, especially anarchists, because anarchists for so long, we've been sort of the broke people. There's very few really wealthy anarchists, and part of the reason is because we don't like dealing with government. We don't want to do deals with governments and take all their the benefits of doing these lobbyist deals with governments, and we don't even like dealing with the Federal Reserve System or fiat currencies. So a lot of the anarchists have really not made a lot of money. I think this is the real opportunity for anarchists is Bitcoin, and it's not too late. It's funny because some people are actually already saying it's too late, which I find funny, because I heard that in 1994 or 1995 from some people about the internet. They would say things like, well, in 1995 they'd say, well, Yahoo's already pretty big, and a few others that are already dead are already pretty big. So I think all the opportunity in the internet is pretty much we missed the boat, So that you have these two sides. It's just like people are either way behind, or they're way too, or they're so far ahead that they actually think they missed the boat already. I don't think that's the case at all. There's so much opportunity in Bitcoin, and I know you're thinking of starting a startup in Bitcoin, and you might want to do a little ad for it here, because I know you're looking for sure. A technical officer. I don't know if you can tell us much about the company, but if there is some really highly skilled technical people who understand Bitcoin, definitely contact Al, and maybe I'll let you also give you ways to contact you through your site and your YouTube channel and all that.
Yeah, you can contact us on freecapitalism.net, the URL. You can contact me on YouTube, whatever. So I'll say anything I want about startups, because in my opinion is that whoever has the idea first isn't the person who wins. The person who is best at implementing that idea is the guy that wins. So I'm willing to be completely open about anything about this. And I think actually trying to keep it secret is stupid. I think the best way to evaluate whether a startup could be good is by telling every single person you know, look at the look on their face at the beginning, and make sure there's not what I call an ugly baby comment. That is, oh yeah, the baby's ugly, and you say, oh no, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. People lying to you just to make you happy, right? You have to be watch out for that. But so the idea I had was, what happens if we could firstly bring Bitcoin into an agorist philosophy, and actually create this whole agorist infrastructure using Bitcoin. So the idea is it's what I call a decentralized delivery network. And what it will allow people to do is post up delivery tasks onto this website to take something from one place to another. So right now I'm specifically marketing it to the highest population of people who already have Bitcoin, because this will be 100% Bitcoin. I don't want any fiat currency near this business at all. And that was going to be students. So the two things that students in the UK spend all their money on is fast food takeaways and alcohol, right? And the fast food takeaways, for example, students order about 20 takeaways a month. And there's actually 1.8 million undergraduate students in the UK. So if you do the math on that, that's 3.6 million takeaways a month. That's a bunch. So even if I made $1 off each individual one of those deliveries, that would be awesome. That'd be great. That'd be a great startup. So the idea is that you'll post up a task, but I won't be delivering it. Who will be delivering it is someone who wants some Bitcoins. So this facilitates two things. The first thing is that people who are scared of exchanges, who don't want to use exchanges, who want to meet up with people to get Bitcoins, but it seems an awfully long and laborious thing to do to meet up with someone to use cash to bid Bitcoins. Even though I love bidding, I love these Bitcoin auctions. If anyone has the opportunity to go one of those, go to it. It's awesome. But rather to earn Bitcoins, and that's how you create your Bitcoin base. Because it reminds me of back in the 50s, back in the 1960s, where for someone to open a bank account, they would work for it. They'd probably get $5 off their parents, and then they'd get a job, and then they'd slowly build up their wealth and whatever. And that's what I see with Bitcoin. So people will get these tasks, and also what it will facilitate means that you can buy anything with Bitcoin. Anything that can arrive at your door can be bought with Bitcoin, because the person delivering it will actually pay for it in fiat, and the other person will pay in Bitcoin. But something else that's really, really interesting is the company I'm working with right now it's like a distributed credit rating agency. So the idea is that every single Bitcoin address on this website, I can't remember what it's called actually. I will I'll link it or something. But on this website, there'll be a link to each individual wallet address, and there will be a reputation attached to that wallet address, which means that when you have transactions online, you can check the reputation of a person. So right now, Amazon has its own reviews, reputations of people. eBay has its own. Other e-commerce sites have their own. But Bitcoin facilitates a way to do that for centralized across the board, across every website, because of the public address. So we'll have that implemented in this website, the centralized reputation. So you'll be able to buy 2 pizzas, get them delivered to your door for Bitcoins, and you can see how reliable this guy is. You can even have information on how long it usually takes. And the really funny part is that, for example, pizza places in the UK charge the equivalent of $20 to get stuff delivered. I would deliver 3 pizzas for $15 any day, for $15 of Bitcoin. And this also gives an opportunity for students, people who are unemployed, which is over 30% of people between the ages of 19 and 25, a way to earn money, firstly without getting a job, second without paying tax, and third it's in Bitcoin. So this is the idea I've got. And if there's any sort of CTOs out there, if there's any full stack developers, anyone like that, please get in touch straight away. We'll have a chat. We've already got some funding. We've got something like $3,000 around that, and we're getting in some more funding. And we've also got 2 Bitcoins as well, which is great. And we're gonna see where it goes from there.
Yeah, it's super exciting. There's so much opportunity, and I think that's a very interesting idea. And for all those people watching, that if you're an anarchist and you don't have much money, look into really understanding Bitcoin really well, like from a technical level, because there isn't very many people who do it very well. I'll give you one example. A past Anarchast guest, Trace Meyer, he's one of the most sought after sort of people, and there's big funds and big companies coming into Bitcoin now, and they're getting tens of millions of dollars worth of investment. And of course, the people investing want to know that they have some very good technical expertise. Trace Meyer, I think, charges $10,000 an hour just to talk to these companies. So there's big money out there, and it's only going to grow. It's very similar to what happened in the internet. Back when I started stockhouse.com in Canada, it was very hard to get anyone who understood what we were trying to do, because of course they don't teach any of this in school. Most colleges are always 10 or 20 years behind. The free market and all the information on the internet, it's all out there on the internet. You just have to do your own studying. And it was very hard to get engineers or anyone, programmers. In fact, by the end of the tech bubble there, around 1999, it was almost impossible to get anyone decent. Even someone who even knew the basics was getting $100,000 a year, because it was just so hard to find these people. I think we're going to see that in the cryptocurrency space. So if you're just sitting there and you're not doing too much except for watching Anarchast videos or reading up on the philosophy of anarchy, try to actually learn something productive at the same time. And I think the sky's the limit for Bitcoin, and not just Bitcoin, but cryptocurrencies in general. I think that we could go through a number of evolutions. I don't know if Bitcoin's going to survive all the evolutions. You never know. It's going to be interesting, but that's where a lot of money's made, is by being aware of what's going on and being on top of this market. This is going to be a big market, and it already is, but it's going to get a lot bigger. And you actually threw out the $1 billion thing. The highest.
Is that the highest one on Anarchast? Is that the highest value?
By far, yeah. You topped me by 1,000, because
okay.
I said Bitcoin could go to $1 million of Bitcoin in today's dollars, of course, because in 10 years the dollar won't even exist. But yeah, you really topped me on that one. I'm not sure about the $1 billion figure, but it's definitely has the potential to go much, much higher. And I'm not saying to necessarily speculate in Bitcoin, because here's the thing to a lot of people that I don't think people have really thought about is Bitcoin could go to $1 million of Bitcoin. It could in the next 10 years. It's totally possible. It also could go to zero. So why would you take all of your assets and put it into Bitcoin? That'd be an all or nothing gamble, which, of course, if you turned out to be right, you could be a billionaire. But why not just take a small percentage of your assets, maybe 2-3%, whatever it is, that maybe that's a few $1,000s for some people, or less, or a few $100s, put it into Bitcoin. And if it goes to $1 million, you'll be doing quite well. And if it goes to zero, you lost a few hundred or a few $1,000s, no big deal. There's no reason to really get too extreme on it. But the main thing is to really understand it, because not many people understand it. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities in this space. I see it all the time. In fact, that's probably one of the biggest questions I get asked. Do you know anyone who really is a good tech guy on Bitcoin? And there's a few guys, but they've already, of course, been really tied up. They're worth their weight in gold right now. And so if you just all the information's on the internet. It's not like you can't learn it. It just takes some effort and some time, and you can be involved in something that's just growing tremendously.
And an idea for anyone out there, because I know on TDV you give like business ideas and stuff like that. I think a really, really good business idea would be to be a consultant on how companies can set up Bitcoin as a payment. If you go on Coinality, if you go on any of the other work for Bitcoin sites, also on Reddit, work for Dogecoin, work for Bitcoin, there's posts every single day that I see of people saying, how do I set up people being able to pay for Bitcoins? And you know what? You don't even need a technical knowledge of that, because they're talking about a lot of bricks and mortar businesses. All you need to do is go on BitPay website and read the first 10 bullet points, and now you know. Just go and look at all these people, I mean, let me give you a statistic here. Over 60% of people over the age of 35 think Bitcoin is a scam or a Ponzi scheme. Yeah. So the older people in particular who are still coming to grips with the internet want to know how they can get this paid from Bitcoin. And if you're young and you're watching Anarchast, I imagine that you already know how Bitcoin works, in the sense that it goes from one person to another and it uses this magical thing called the internet. So there's an opportunity there, I think, for anyone, even from a non-technical space. So I think Bitcoin is the biggest opportunity, and like I said, I think this is looking at the very, very expensive car and saying that could be all yours, you know.
Yeah, no, the free market, if you allow it to function, which actually the internet thankfully still is fairly free. It's the most anarchist place on earth, and look how good it works. And no one ever says, I hate the internet, or we got to turn off the internet, this thing's bad. And so these
But what
things
happened to Mark Dice? Sorry, what happened to Mark Dice?
who's that?
I think you posted this today on Facebook. A guy had his YouTube channel taken down.
Oh,
And
Mark
they reckon
Dice. Mark Dice, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is a war. We're in a war here. It's mostly in the mind, though, which is great. There's not a lot of blood, although the government does kidnap people quite a bit. They kidnapped Charlie Schramm and a number of people. But yeah, for those who don't know, Mark Dice's YouTube channel just got completely wiped off YouTube. He spread a lot of information about the financial elites, about how the system works, about the Illuminati. And he had something like 30 million views, and it was just wiped off. And just to show how much they were targeting him, he actually started up another channel just afterwards and reposted the videos, and they took all those off. So I'm expecting a lot of that to happen. But of course, technology is always going to find a way around it, and that just happened in Turkey recently. The Turkish Prime Minister recently, a lot of people have been posting the truth on Twitter about what he's doing, and he got very upset, and he said, we're going to, he basically said we're going to kill all these people, but he also said, we're going to also destroy Twitter. No one will have access to Twitter. The people will see the power of the Turkish government. And so he turned off Twitter, and all he did was he changed on the DNS that goes into Turkey, he just made it so it wouldn't let Twitter go through. So everyone changed their DNS settings in Turkey, and actually there was no decline in tweets from Turkey during that time, and he thought he had turned it off. So these are the things that are going on. There's going to be a lot of problems. There's going to be the governments coming after us at different levels, but technology, and that's why definitely if you're looking at what you want to do in life, get into technology, because there's so many ways around everything when it comes to technology, and the government usually is a few steps behind the market, always is actually, and yeah, it's not going to be easy. There's going to be a war. There's going to be some people who are going to get killed by the CIA or the U.S. government or somebody, or a lot of people are going to get kidnapped, all for doing nothing wrong, no victim. And there's going to be a lot of people who make a lot of money. This is definitely interesting times, and it's a war. Alex Jones calls it InfoWars, and I agree. It's a war for your mind, and it's interesting. We're kind of like, in the old days, 100 years ago, when there was wars, it was mostly like a lot of people just killing each other and napalming each other. Nowadays, it's quite a bit more peaceful in those terms. It's more of a war of technology, although it could get worse. I really don't know what's going to happen. We're seeing all kinds of crazy stuff happening from governments around the world, but it's definitely not a boring time to be alive, and there's a ton of opportunities. So if you're one of those people who says, oh, I have no opportunity because the government doesn't let me do this, doesn't let me do that, forget about the government. Just do it. Find ways around them. There's always ways around them.
Yeah, and I that really reminds me. There's a theory. There's a theory that I actually wrote in an academic paper, which went to a foreign policy institute, of which I got no reply, which was somewhat predictable. Was that this idea that if you looked in the 20th century, it tended to be the case that the enemies of the state were other enemies. And with the 20th century, we had World War II, and this brought states to realize it was more efficient for them to collude with each other and to collectively tax everyone than it was to tax their individual livestock. So what did we see? We saw the UN, we saw we see the World Bank, we can see massive international institutions, along with nuclear weapons, which makes it really, the things change when the leaders can be killed, right? And I think that so what's actually happened now is that the general population of the Earth has become the enemy, because states can only exist with perpetual war. 1984 points this out, but if you think about it from an incentives point of view, the only way the state can exist is if there's enough fear in people to think that the state is the only barrier stopping them from turning into, I wouldn't say anarchy, because anarchy is awesome, but I would say this sort of savage, brain-eating zombie society that we would spiral into without government. So I think it's important for people to realize, because I also think that otherwise, if people don't realize this, there's going to become a culmination of a point in the middle of this century where it's either going to be the case where you're going to be slowly walking into some sort of emotional or actual physical prison, or you're having to come to realize that the power, the huge, enormous power of the state can no longer be sustained for humans to continue to exist in this current form.
Yeah,
without going to Alex Jones.
Yeah, I just watched Hunger Games 2 last night, and man, I love the ending of that. I don't know if you've seen Hunger Games.
I think I saw the first one,
Oh,
it kind of sucked.
Oh, really? You didn't like it?
No, I don't know. I thought it was... there was a lot of annoying characters.
Oh, okay. Well, besides that, though, I think the message was interesting because it was very, it said a lot about how the world is today, about how the government is controlling everybody. Man, in the second one, they really let it go, saying the truth about how governments exist, and they said the same thing that you did, that they need to constantly be causing problems, and then also at the same time, it's like the bread and circuses thing, always have these diversions to take people's mind off of it, and that's the only way that they have any sort of power, and at the very end, they actually started a revolution, and so I'm really looking forward to part 3 of that, and there's a lot of things changing, including the entertainment, because people have access to more things. It's not just Hollywood that can just put things out now. Anyone with a decent camera can put out a decent movie now, and people have access to information, and it's really exciting. It's amazing times. If you're bored out there, I don't know how you could be bored. There's so many things going on. If you're interested in any of this stuff at all, it's just it's actually almost overwhelming what's going on. There's 100 things every day that are just almost shocking and changes, both good and bad, and it's very interesting. But we should wrap this up. Everyone's got ADD nowadays, which isn't a disease, it's just an actual part of the human evolution. When you have access to this much information, it's actually hard to concentrate or focus for too long, so we try to keep things shorter. But why don't you tell people about your website, your YouTube channel, any other way to see and contact you?
Okay, so go to freecapitalism.net. We've got a YouTube channel called freecapitalism.net. We're on Tumblr, we're on Twitter, we're on Google+, we're on all kinds of social media channels. We try and speak about stuff that's funny. We try to make anarchism and libertarianism a little bit more funny, a little bit more witty. I guess we kind of trying to go for a sort of Ricky Gervais show. If Ricky Gervais was an anarchist, I guess that's the kind of thing we're going for. And we talk about all kinds of interesting stuff, so leave a bunch of comments, subscribe, and we hope to see you there.
Sounds great. Thank you, Alan. That's been another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
This is Anarchast.